I'm Mark Hopkins. I'm back with Ed Goldman of the Pinhurst Preservation. And we're talking about something I don't think a lot of people know about, but I think it touches a lot of people also. One thing I see in my dealings is that when people come back to these places, the active ones that are still around, lots of people see people come to the gate and they have visceral reactions because they remember coming there as a child to see an uncle or an aunt or something. Somebody was put there, and they have these very visceral reactions to it. And I think that we really, I don't know, you may disagree with me on this and feel free, just be gentle. But I think that we have all these causes, and everybody's behind their cause. Somebody wants to save the spotted owl, and somebody wants to save three-legged dogs and everything. And it's not to diminish the value of anything. But every now and then I'll see causes that I think get bumped up out of order. And I've always felt that people with mental handicaps, back to my youth, were always near the bottom of the barrel. They were always getting stepped on by other causes that were more noble or prettier or more palatable or something. And I'll catch some heat for this probably, but I've been on both sides. I work with an organization that did this for a long time, and I am a firm believer, anybody tell you, but I think that substance abuse is one of those ones that stepped over this cause and got a lot of attention, and somehow it's been polished and made more attractive. Whereas this cause is still something that's an afterthought for many people, not everybody, but a lot of people. And it doesn't get the public airplay that these other ones do. You have any ideas on that?
Well, first of all, the opioid epidemic is real. One of the reasons I think it has escalated in the minds of both political leaders and the general public is it's kind of middle class and upper class.
Okay.
People who are dying are more like people we know. Doesn't make it any less or more glamorous. It doesn't make it less or more important to deal with. But people who look different, somehow it's part of our American culture, I think. Every immigrant class that came over always had difficulty until the assimilation took place, and then they became part of us. We all came from somewhere. My grandparents came from the Ukraine and what was then Russia. Had they not left, they'd have been killed. People come to this dream country, and people will come on rafts and cross oceans and do anything to get here. So when someone is different and made to be seen as different, somehow we repress that difference. People who are more like us are easier to understand. One of my favorite stories that a dear friend who's a Philadelphia historian told me, when the Irish immigrants came here, they had a very difficult time back in the 1840s and 50s and 60s. And the first Irish Catholic church that was built in Philadelphia on Broad Street was built by Irish laborers. And one of the things that they did was they each grabbed a brick and threw it as high as they could. And they only put glass in, windows, stained glass higher than you could throw the highest brick, because historically windows were broken in their homes and their shops in Philadelphia. Now we almost can chuckle at something like that. Italians that came in, the Jews that came in, the Chinese that came in, everybody came from somewhere, and part of me believes that's what's wonderful about this great country. And unfortunately, people who look different, who pray different, we're going through some of that same things that we did over 100 years ago or more.
Well, and everybody's been the whipping boy, at one time or another.
But people with disabilities always had some stigma about them that were obvious.
But disabilities almost became their race.
Well,
it became their category.
It became their difference.
It overpowered everything else.
And people forget today there's over 40 million Americans with disabling conditions of all kinds. Many of them are from birth, some are from work-related accidents and injuries, some are from coming back from the war or all the various wars. And so they wear the stigma because of the difference. And I learned this is what made sense to me as a young guy. Why the stigmatization? Why did people suffer? Because they were somehow seen different, and that difference was devalued. And it's and that is, you can turn that around.
I think we have to create things we're comfortable with. Yeah. In all aspects. And I think sometimes, unfortunately, that comes to classifying people into comfortable little niches. And I think it can get out of control if you're narrow-minded. But I just see, I remember it's become so much. I've watched people with handicaps get additional rights. I've watched them tear up the sidewalk so that you could go anywhere and disabled people could go further, and things we don't think about. Technology has helped them. I've watched things I don't understand about it. I don't understand why there's, 82 handicap parking spots in front of auto parts stores. I just don't get the connection.
They get all the good spots, don't they?
I know. And and the thing is, if I would ever go and see two of those spots full, I might understand it. But there's all these leaps and bounds made on these different things. And I just think that people that have mental disabilities are still held back. I think everybody's stepping past them.
Well, it's very interesting. I know of people who have, as they get older, conditions that affect their life that you can't see. And they look like they're just lazy and malingering because you don't see it. But somehow if they had a crutch or used a cane or had a cast in their arm, we would all feel sorry for them. So obvious difference for many of the people that I wound up advocating for pretty much all my work life, you could see it. And that difference made people feel uncomfortable. The concept in sociology was called the deviance image. And no one liked that. And so we either, in the very early days, we took people who were then seen as mentally retarded and put them away for their benefit so they could, quote, be with their own kind and they could learn rather than being stigmatized in the community. And then later it evolved that we put people away in these places for society's benefit, that there was something about them not only made us uncomfortable, but we had all these deviant images that they procreate and they steal and they do all these other things. So whether we put them in the place for their benefit or society's benefit, they all wound up in the same place, and it were hurtful places over time.
And under these hospitals are designed all very similar. Some of them followed, there was a Quaker model, there's an English model, there's a Kirkbride model, and there's variations. But one of the things, they have tunnel systems under them, and the tunnels were, in many instances, used to move the patients so the people didn't see them moving between buildings because of that stigma you're talking about. That's how scared they were of the stigma.
And the best way to get rid of stigma is you end it.
You just shove it in your face.
We all know we can go into stores now and see people that we believe to have something different about them, leading good, productive lives, working, enjoying life. And it's basically no different than what any of us want. We want life on our own terms. We want to make decisions for ourselves. Instead of having someone tell me where I can live, with whom I can associate, whether or not I can go to church if I choose to. All these decisions were always made for people when we put them away. And it started the movement of self-advocacy, people first, speaking for ourselves. And I remember in the very early days, it seemed like, well, are they really have anything to tell us? And oh boy, did they. And they began to speak up. And whether it's any group that's advocating, whether we advocate now, it's as American as apple pie is to protest. I mean, that's how our country started.
Right.
And so we should embrace it and listen to it. What are they saying? Why are they doing this? What is it that they want that somehow the system or the society that they're in is either preventing or not providing? And the more and better that we listen, I think the better we all become as a country.
Now, on the property you guys were going to do years ago, and the property it's not like it used to be. It's I call it a shaved poodle because it doesn't look like when I was there. But the memory comes back. When you go there. But the old superintendent's house, you guys are trying to get that. You were going to do a museum, but museums are historically costly. And then you wanted to do some kind of informational center to maintain that history. And you progress forward, and then you hit some obstacles. And where's it stand now?
Well, as a board, we're still rethinking. Originally, when the Pennhurst Memorial and Preservation Alliance started, it was to preserve the memories of what happened there, the never again. It was to pay honor to the 10,000 plus lives of the people who went through that place, and to never forget, never again. And so originally it was to hopefully acquire one building. Many of the old buildings were still standing and had been left really to decay over 20 plus years. And the idea was that we would have a museum that people could visit and could learn the history of the place and what happened, and to memorialize the lives of the people who were there. And then it became more and more apparent that out of the way small museums, people don't visit, and they become costly, and many of them around America have since closed. Then we began to rethink, what could we do? And eventually the state decided to demolish pretty much all of the old buildings. A section of the grounds were sold off to the current asylum owners, the people that do the Halloween imagery. And over 50,000 people over a 7-week period go through that and literally walk or drive past the one building that we wanted to acquire for this memorialization.
And most of those people have no idea what happened there. They see it as an amusement.
Yes.
They have no idea.
It's a scare thing. And they don't understand that a lot of the imagery used in the haunted house and the asylums to scare people is unbelievably demeaning to the lives of the people who lived in Pennhurst.
And I know that the people that are running it, there's been several generations of people, and they seem to be, each generation seems to be coming more on board with trying to humanize it a little bit over time. And I don't know what generation, but we're on a couple. But if you think that it's being overblown, with a slight exaggeration, I'd say, would you build a theme park that highlighted the carnage at Gettysburg? You know, would you do something like that and consider it tasteful?
Well,
you know.
Hard to do. We're having that debate amongst ourselves on the board.
But this is kind of what's going on there. It's like this is hallowed ground in its own way.
Some of us are so